Good morning. How we doing? Welcome to a Dark 30. Still a little chilly in the 40s. And it's not going to get out of the 40s. As we slowly transition into spring. Hey, speaking of the 40s. God. You know, my topic is internment of people. I'm not sure where all this is going. I'm not sure what mills around inside a person's head like Trump. I'm really not sure about the people that are around him. And it's got to be hard. You know, and I'm going to go on the dementia thing, but you know, people that have to deal with their aging parents or something like that and having to do some of the crazy, you know, roll with the crazy punches that they do is tiring. And you can't tell me that's not what's going on because of the way that the delusions of grandeur, as I call it, thinking and talking, everything's in billions and thousands, or it's the greatest, it'll be the best, or it's got to be the worst, it's the most horrific, it never just says what it is. It's got to add the adjectives. Well, that being said, the latest thing, the latest event in one of the rings on this great circus is internment of people. Okay? My father was in World War II as a pilot. Okay? And a damn good one at that. Okay? But all that aside, we had family in Canada who he had contact with and who kind of groomed him, and they were upper crust, and when America got into the war, they didn't quite understand why we were doing it, you know. Why he decided to enlist, but he did. He also, growing up in Washington and Seattle, he had, back then, close friends that were Japanese. There was a number of Japanese families that lived in around the south end of Seattle and Burien and all that. There was a number of them that Dad was like very chummy with. Okay? And when all this went down in World War II, and they decided to do the internment, it tore him apart too. And simple prejudice. He was able to keep his faculties about him, although we all know that generation was very blunt and jokingly and whatever, but there was still the love there. There was the hate for what was wrong, but there was a love for the heritage and the ethnic jokes and all that. Look at anybody that watches the Rat Pack and you'll find that out. It's hard for people to wrap their head around, but you got to understand it was a different time. Okay? The reason why I'm bringing this up is because it was understood why. there was probably times that it was actually safer for, I hate to say it, Japanese families to be isolated away from Americans because of how stupid, crazy we could be. Okay, but in the case in point, you can't just educate everyone. We were smart enough yet, as a population, to wrap our head around things like that. The fear that all of a sudden this came rising, so it was put in there, and it was sad. Hence the reason why we went back years later and said, no, this was wrong. These were families that were here and had been here for a long time. You know? And at that point, you need to also understand Japan, because Japan had their honorable ways. They were very stoic in certain things. And they, still are, but they were very stoic back then. And just like when Pearl Harbor, we saw it as a horrific and this big monster coming at us. They personally took it hard because we weren't ready. They essentially, shot an unarmed person, so to speak. And that was totally against their honor. Okay? That was not the race of people that they are, or were back then. So there's a lot of different moving parts to this back in the 40s. But overall, we are able to look back and go, this was wrong. There has got to be a better way. I get it, but there is fear that dropped, fence posts down. It's fear that put everyone in boxes of little houses in a community, and it was fear that kept them there for however long. Okay? Rather than thinking it out. And years later, we went back and said, no, this was wrong. We now have a situation where it's not a wartime. It's not wartime at all. Okay? And yet we have a president who wants to invoke that once again, and he's talking internment. Now, I'm going to say this as a disclaimer. We now know that he just talks. Unfortunately, he can talk in many different manners because of the money that he has. He can summon a press conference immediately. He can tweet immediately. He can get on a social media thing and write immediately. And so people are forced to run into his voice and his thoughts. And a lot of the things he does, he says, he just throws out there. And what it does is it tests the waters. That's why I've been calling it throwing noodles against the wall to see if any stick. A lot of it out there, he does this just for fucking show. That's all. And once again, my little disclaimer, if some of the F-bombs I drop shock you, then you're really, really not in tune with what's going on in the world. Because that's not near as shocking as some of the stuff that he's pulling or that anybody else pulls. So, that being said, going back to this, he throws these things out against the wall, see if any stick. This is another one of them. Talking about internment. We now know that it's funny because we're now learning that we can do something about it, that we can say no. And you do a big enough push against him, and he bows down. He will back off. But the fact is that he still has that capability of saying it. My reason for doing this morning is because the group that is set to be his buddies, and we'll say it this way, to be a babysitter at this point, who would be the ones who would open their mouths the most, for some reason are not there at all. I don't understand. I'll say it again. I don't understand where the Republicans are on this. We had Elon and Doge walk in and start doing all this auditing and walked in the Treasury Department. Now they're talking about they want everyone's data. Okay, for the sake of auditing books, what's that got to do with anything? As a person of the United States, you would think that a Republican would speak out against that and go, I'm sorry, this is not your call. You do not get to do that. Okay? But you don't hear it. The Republicans are nowhere to be found right now on all this whole matter, and I don't understand it. Because if this would have happened, we always say it, on the past president's watch, there would have been screaming from all points. So I'm not really getting it. I'm not really getting it at all. I've probably ran long on this talk. But there's my point. It doesn't make sense why they're not voicing their opinion. It doesn't make sense why they're not going... No, it doesn't make sense why they're not reining the president in on some of the things that he's saying. That's what I wanted to say. They got nothing but love for you. Have a beautiful day. It's just another fun-filled day in America.